Hi, everybody, and welcome to the most recent episode of Let Me Introduce You, a series of interviews I do from the Memoir Project that introduce you to people that I think you should know. And this is most definitely one of the people, and maybe the top person I can think of that you should know, because Jane Friedman is going to help you understand the business of writing. So, welcome, everybody. Before we get going, before I say hi to Jane, do me a favor, go to the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel and tell me that you can see the screen and hear my voice. You won't see us because Jane and I have had just enough Zoom meetings to last the rest of our lives. I'm sort of zoomed out, as I like to say. And so if you could just tell me you can, oh, great, Cynthia, thank you. This is wonderful. Joni, okay, everybody, there's so many people here, and I'm so grateful that you're here because Jane deserves a huge audience. All right, so we are recording this. You will receive a recording 24 hours after we get off the call. There's an awful lot of you here. We're going to do our very best to answer all your questions. I'll try to aggregate them at the end so that Jane isn't answering the same question over and over and like that. So I think we should just jump in. So hi, Jane. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing great, Marianne. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm delighted that you're here. And before we went live, we were talking about AWP, the Associated Writing Programs conference that you've just come back from. And so just to let everybody know that you are in it always up to your earrings, as far as I know.
Yes.
And good, good. I love to know that we're speaking to experts. So I'm just going to give us a brief intro of who we are. I'm Marion Roach Smith. I'm the founder of the Memoir Project, and where we teach all memoir all the time. But I think everybody on this call knows me. And so let's get to Jane. So Jane has spent over 25 years in the publishing industry. And her real thing is educating authors, which is why she is, as I say to her every time we speak, the only person I recommend when it comes to the business of writing. She was named Publishing Commentator of the Year by Digital Book World. Her expertise has been featured in the New York Times, The Atlantic, NPR, Today Show, Wired, Guardian, Fox News, and BBC. Her book, The Business of Being a Writer, is something that no writer should be without. And there's a new edition. So welcome, Jane. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
So let's just start with that AWP for a second so people know. Associated Writing Programs, the annual conference, tell me a little bit about its purpose and before we jump into the book so people get the reference of what we were discussing and maybe perhaps what you talked about there.
So, AWP is probably the largest gathering of writers in the United States. I dare say North America.
Hmm.
About 10,000 people attended this year. It's gotten beyond 12,000 some years. And AWP stands for the Association of Writers and Writing Programs. So when it first began decades ago, it was mainly to bring together teachers of creative writing at universities and other types of programs.
Hmm.
And writers started attending as well. But over time, it has become more and more focused, I think, on the writer rather than the writing programs. Although certainly, a huge part of its membership is creative writing students in those programs, and as well as publications and other things that get affiliated with these creative writing programs. So it's a show that I've been going to for many years, although I hadn't been recently. But I was there on the occasion of launching my new book. My publisher exhibits there, as do like 500 publishers. So it's on the more literary end. It's poetry and short stories, personal essays, people who write things that you would consider literature with a capital L.
Yes, the difference is not lost on any of us, I think. But I like literature with a capital. I was explaining to my husband last night that the novel that I'm reading right now is literary in the 0.0001%,
Mm.
that high and then that's why I was making those groaning noises, struggling with it. Because he's like, you
Yes.
don't usually make noises like that when you read a book. I was like, well, this is one of those books that's made to make you feel really, really uncomfortable
Mm.
and kind of uneducated and also doesn't really take place on this planet. So yeah, I'm struggling. Yeah. So I get it. Well, I think AWP does such a great job and it's such a glorious thing. And it has morphed so wonderfully over the years to be so much for the writer. I've been a couple of times, I've learned a lot, and I love sitting in those rooms. So thank you for doing that. So who's in the audience today? Well, someone who's writing memoir. So we're all memoir writers here, as I know you know, Jane. And you're also people who want to publish your memoir writing. And there's lots of ways to do that. And is usually the people that come to these conferences need a little update on how and when to begin getting the book or the piece or the essay to the market. So I think the first thing that we need to remind everybody of, Jane, is that along with being many things to many writers, whether it be an art, a profession, or a demand from one's very soul, writing is a business. So when I talk to people about the business of writing, I try to sort of let them run their hands over the idea of the liability, like who's getting who's paying for the book, what do they get if they give you an advance, and like they have a liability aspect.
Mhm.
And the more you get closer to self-publishing, the liability shifts to you. But maybe that's not the words you use. So when you describe the business of writing, when somebody gives you that look like you're going to take my soul and make me take it to the market, you know that look? I know you do.
I do. I do.
Yeah. And it's legitimate. It is people's souls. It is in memoir, it's frequently a trauma beyond consideration. So, what do you say when you first explain to people that this is a business?
That it doesn't have to be antithetical or in conflict with whatever prompted you to to reach this moment where you're confronted with it, rather than seeing it as the thing you must suffer through. I try to adjust the mindset whenever possible to, okay, now that you've produced this work of art, you probably want someone to read it. You probably wrote it for a purpose. You want it to be out in the world. You want to make it public. And so that's certainly where part of the business exists. It's in understanding how do you get that work seen? How do you make it visible? And then depending on what your goals are, that may involve trying to find a business partner,
Hmm.
a publisher or an agent, or it might mean essentially starting up your own business. Sometimes I consider books, every single book, like a little startup, because they are like there is some sort of market demand for them, and part of your goal as an author is to understand and figure out, and I think this is a creative act really, figure out where does that audience lie, where does the market demand lie, and how can you best engage with those people.
Yeah, I love the phrase being seen. I think that is so much more considerate than me talking about liability. And I genuinely appreciate that. I knew you would have a better phrase for it because you would like your considered response to whatever you're writing about probably to be seen. It's a rare person who comes to my classes who then wants to put it in a drawer and leave it in a
Mm,
drawer. But seen has a lot of different possibilities, right? You these days we have
yes.
lots of ways to be seen, and I suspect that's what people need a little help with as well. So Jane has just released a second edition of the best book I know on the business of being a writer, and the title is perfect. And we're going to talk for a minute about why there's a second edition so that you all understand in case you have the first edition, much like the first edition of my little book on how to write memoir. It was greatly changed in the second edition. So I'm very aware of why and how a writer does this. But this was published by the University of Chicago Press, which is one of the great university presses. And it's going to help you set realistic expectations about making money from your work and give you a better understanding of the industry. It has some great reviews. You can go on Jane's website, which I'll give you the URL for in a minute. And oh, I should have said that we are going to answer questions at the end. We're going to talk for about a half an hour and answer questions. So just hold your questions till then or put them in the chat. It's fine. I mean, in the questions box. But the book itself has a new edition, and that's the reason for us getting together today. And it fascinates me. I think this business is changing fast. Would you say fast, not fast enough, too quickly? What would you say, Jane, in terms of the the difference between yesterday and today in terms of publishing?
I mean, I almost hesitate to put a speed on it because I think it's confusing and overwhelming for people, because everyone's experiencing the changes differently depending on where you sit in the industry.
Mm,
So it's sometimes it's even hard to describe, the changes that have taken place. I kind of first have to figure out, okay, who are you and what are you trying to accomplish? And then I will tell you the changes that you should expect.
that's a great
Um,
way of looking at it. We're losing 1 to 2 newspapers a week in this country, and
right,
which is a terrifying reality.
right.
And both of my parents were newspaper journalists. My husband's a newspaper journalist. My sister, everybody I know is in the newspaper business. And we are mourning this.
Hmm.
And not-for-profit journalism is becoming the phrase that we use in the newspaper business. And I get nothing but blank looks. I get like
Yeah.
two flashlights of eyes coming out of people like, what?
Mhm,
What's
mhm.
not-for-profit journalism? So if the journalism that we grew up with, if the newspaper business is changing that fast, there's now so many of these not-for-profit news media developing. I imagine the book publishing too is changing so fast. And as you said, it depends on who you are. If you're a
Yeah.
consumer of the news in the newspaper business or someone who wants to invest, these are very different positions.
Mhm, mhm.
So who do you think is best? How well situated do you think a writer is right now to comprehend this world?
Well, I think the good news for writers is that over time, and I mean deep time, like hundreds of years, I find that their creative spirit, and adaptability, they always find their place in whatever the market decides to do. How writers have earned a living over time has shifted. We're in the era now where it has been predominantly through sales alone, whether that's book sales or sales to a magazine or newspaper. But we're starting to see that maybe erode a little bit for certain types of work, or erode a lot. Um, but I think what gives me optimism about the changes is that despite some of the negative things that have come out of digital media and social media, there are more options. So if someone at a publisher, or if you can't, or an agency, if they do not see the potential in your work, if they don't want to offer you opportunities, if they don't want to partner, there's so many ways to spread that story or message, whether it's self-publishing or an array of digital media publishing tools. We're also seeing traditional publishers, from the biggest to the smallest, extend their hand in more what I would call generous ways, more like a true partnership um, approach,
Hmm.
where authors who self-publish and are very successful doing it because they've been able to find their readership, they are partnering with them to handle things that it's very difficult for a writer to handle on their own, like print retail distribution. And then they allow the writer to keep their ebook and audiobook rights. So that's been a huge shift in the last 5 years or so, and it's happening more and more. And I think this only benefits writers, because they earn more, they keep more rights, they get to use publishers for what they are actually good at least as of right now, which is blanketing the country in print copies.
Yeah. Yeah. The word distribution means getting the books into the stores. And
Yeah.
so who your distributor is very important. In the onset, I'm going to say 15 years ago, of hybrid publishing, I'm probably off by a couple of years, but it's in their
Hmm.
general frame. The big debate was, well, yeah, but who's getting the books into the stores? Because it doesn't do you a hell of a lot of good to publish a book and then have to go to stores yourself, unless that's what you really wanted to do as an indie publisher of your own work. So distribution it just means that, for those people who were wondering what that word means. So your first edition, second edition, to me, and loving both of these books and thinking, damn, that woman gets it right. Having published 4 books with the 4 biggest publishers in the world, and self-published things, and worked at newspaper and blah, 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 blah. I've been in this business a long time. You do have a singular finger on the pulse of publishing. But I think, at least from my point of view, the question hasn't changed. How do I get my work published? Or how do I market, promote, and sell my book? But that's me. What about you? Has this essential question changed?
No, I think those are the two biggest questions that I address, that I have addressed over time, um, all 25 years that I've been
Yeah.
doing this. How do I get this work out? How do I publish it? And then how do I market it? And I think, earning money is often a third, fourth, fifth, or not a concern at all, which is, you know, um, it's interesting, that a lot of people have motivations that, are more, they're more tied to getting visibility rather than earning money.
And that's so interesting because I would venture to say that that's always been the case. I'm sure there were people from the first printing presses on that were doing this to advertise their business or
Mm,
whatever. But I do meet a lot of those people too, who are now learning to write memoir to augment a business, to become
yeah,
the box of books that they give out to their clients if they've got, many clients. So there's a lot of ways to look at a book, and I
yeah.
think it's good to remember that. I sometimes urge certain people to write memoir for reasons other than why I urge other people to write memoir. So it's a very good reminder that everybody can have a different intent, but the questions seem to remain the same. So why a second edition? What did you learn in the first, or what from the public's feedback did you feel you needed to include? I have in a minute a bulleted list of the things
Mm,
that you say
yeah.
you have in the second edition. So you don't have to go into the content so much yet because we're going to take that apart sort of bullet point by bullet point. But tell me why and how a writer says, time for a second edition.
Well, in this case, it was my editor who said it
God
was time for a
bless
second
that
edition.
editor.
And I mean, I felt it too. I frankly, I did not want to do the work of putting out a second edition, but when you're starting to cringe at stuff that's in the first because it's gone out of date, especially with social media, digital media, the newspapers you mentioned, magazines, it's like it's not that I think I wasn't guiding people appropriately any longer. It's just that people will look at this and feel like it's no longer relevant and question the entirety of it.
Yes.
So that was the big issue to address.
Yeah.
Another issue, as far as coming from the readers, was people wanted exercises. I've never been a big personal exercise person myself. Like when I read a book, I don't do the exercises.
No, me neither. I'm glad we're having this moment together.
So, I did not prioritize writing them, but that was another thing my editor and readers came back and said, we really want some exercises, which makes sense, especially for the classroom, which is what I wanted for this book. I wanted it to be adopted into the writing programs. And so they want exercises. And I provided one with each chapter.
I love that you did that. I too, I've never used a writing prompt. I don't give them. I don't give exercises. I've never used one. I got my 135th book this week in the mail from someone who's worked with me and published a book. Nobody's ever been given an exercise by me, but I totally saw this as exactly on brand for where your book is, which is
Yeah.
not only with writers like me who don't do them, but with writers who do in the classroom. And they're very, very popular. People like
Yes.
that sort of runway feeling like, all right, we're going. And that's
Yeah.
great. And I totally love the fact that, when you get to the cringe place, I got to the cringe place with my first edition when I realized that instead of smartphone or iPhone, it said Blackberries.
Oh,
You know,
no.
yeah. I was like, oh no. Oh no, 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 and I really started to freak out. And my publisher said, "Yeah, yeah, no, you're so far past the curdling date at this point." So yeah, so that's a good thing for people to know. Why this second edition? So you open this book differently, and I want you to talk about that. As you just said, the work was not something you looked forward to, but you literally went back. You didn't just go in and change BlackBerry to smartphone, and neither did I, by the way. I think I added 40 pages to my book, and all kinds of things got changed. But why was it needed to literally open differently?
My own thinking about the business changed through my interaction with writers and teaching classes just over time. The first edition opened with a really hard-nosed section about lead generation, which if you don't know what that means, this is exactly why it was a hard-nosed opening. It was throwing people into the deep end. And I felt like, I wanted to shake people out of complacency. I didn't want to guide them in gently. And so with the second edition, I thought, I don't think that's actually helping anyone.
I just love that. I was hoping you would say that, like, I kind of thought that first one, yeah, no. And this is the thing is you can change your mind about
Yeah,
what you think you need to do to enter the room. Because
yeah.
that's what we're doing when we open a book. I'm entering your room and I want to be gracious about it or at least exciting about it. Yeah. Yeah, I
Mhm.
like the second opener very much. I liked the first opener and I understood it, but I think it might really have benefited from this new version. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So the new edition opens up with what I call mindset matters because I do feel like people often fail at the business, not because they lack talent, not because they're naive about the business, but they just get beaten down and they don't understand that really everyone goes through this. Everyone has the self-doubt. Everyone goes through the rejection. Everyone has this period of up and down and up and down. And you just have to push through it. And I just wanted to make that point up front.
And I think it's so gracious and I think it's so important. Anybody who's submitted something to the New York Times op-ed pages in the last, I'm going to say 6 months, knows that it's a 5 or 6 week wait to hear back is not
Mhm.
uncommon.
Yeah.
Anybody who has sent something to the Wall Street Journal will find exactly the same thing. The frustration in the business is something that exists. You can be turned away by one editor and loved by another. There's
Mhm.
just so much subjectivity,
Yeah.
but there's also so much traffic and so many if you're looking at just like newspapers, the big traditional newspapers, so many fewer. So I like the fact that you brought us into the room differently. I think that's a really good decision on your part and very gracious. So the other difference is, as I said, you have these. I literally went to your website and I just
Mhm.
love the fact that you say this is what I did differently. And you've talked about the exercises, but let's talk about the understanding that platform building constitutes a section of its own. And let's define platform. If there's a word in publishing that makes people's crazier than structure, and structure is the one that makes writers drink gin straight out of the bottle. I think platform makes them consider something even harder
Yeah.
than gin. So why don't you take on platform instead of me taking it on today?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it really goes back to visibility. It's about your visibility to the target readership you're hoping to reach with a particular book or over your career. And I know that unfortunately, because agents and publishers talk about this a lot and they'll emphasize what they want to see in a platform, and they're often referring to these huge online followings, I feel like platform has become this distasteful, onerous, burdensome thing that no one wants to do because it's, this extra whatever that's been added to your plate. But I think that, you know, that here I have to back up and say, not every author has to build a platform to get a book deal. I mean,
Hmm.
it is common if you want an agent for a nonfiction book, but that's a very particular scenario. And by and large, authors don't need to concern themselves with platform building before actually writing their book. That said, the reason I put it up front in this edition and made it a section of its own is I had to acknowledge there's all of this bad blood surrounding it and confusion that needs to be cleared up before we go any further.
Yep.
And I also wanted to point out, look, platform should be built for you. This is really your asset that lasts over the length of your career. Do not build it for agents. Do not build it for publishers. I think that's a fool's errand.
Hmm.
Build it for yourself so you are less dependent on anyone else to reach your readership. And so this section kind of goes into how you do that.
I think that's such good advice. I wonder how many podcasts were started with the sole intent of making somebody else happy. And
Oh, yeah.
as someone who has a podcast, I can tell you that would be exhausting.
Yeah.
absolutely exhausting. I'm 140 episodes into mine, and I love what I do. But if I was doing it for anybody else for any crazy, it would be a horror.
Yeah.
So there's more book publishing and book marketing information. And is that because you know more? Is that because there's more out there to know? What's the rationale behind that in this new edition?
So there's a dedicated section on hybrid publishers
Good.
or hybrid publishing. And, this is one of these, it's a phenomenon that I think when I wrote the first edition, I was like, maybe this will go away.
Yes,
I'm not going
I
to cover
remember
it.
having that conversation with you.
But it has not gone away, and it's necessary to discuss it and what its place is and who it might benefit, and also add some warnings, because I think people have misplaced expectations of it. There's more information on self-publishing and marketing and promotion generally, both for those who traditionally publish and those who self-publish. So, there were length considerations with the first edition. I managed to get some more pages added to this one, so that gave me some room to expand that.
That's great. And I'm well aware of how many fewer magazines we have on the stand since your first edition, but less industry information
Mm.
on magazine and online media. Why?
It's it's so hard to predict what's going to happen. And
Yeah.
I mean, I never want to be the person who says X publishing is dead or X industry is dead. But if I were going to say it about anything, I feel like I would say it about magazines. It's not that magazines or whatever we call a magazine today won't be published in the future. It's just that as an industry, it's being absorbed into other areas. And so when someone like what Graydon Carter, the former editor of Vanity Fair, when his next venture, Airmail,
Hmm.
there's no print component to that.
Right.
Um, it's I think it's on Substack actually,
Hmm.
or maybe or some sort of fancy version of Substack. So that's I feel like when someone gets an idea for what I would have called a magazine 20 years ago, it's now started as kind of a brand, a media venture that includes a lot of different things. And I just found I didn't want anything I wrote about magazines or online media to go out of date the second the book was published.
It's a terrible feeling to be out of date on publication date. Yeah. Yeah, and it's a good perspective because Substack, what an extraordinary thing, and how many voices have been brought to us. But I would never consider a newsletter a magazine, and I would
Right,
never have considered a newsletter legitimate,
right.
except for around your neighborhood association or your tennis club or something,
Yeah,
right? That we've
yeah.
repurposed the word newsletter is one of the most shocking aspects of
Mm.
this, and elevated it, gave it a huge, raise. So and so you've got a newly added part 6 on business basics. And so business, business, business. And how much do you think an author needs to understand the business to succeed in the business?
Well, I like to say that the formula for success, if it exists, and that's of course questionable, is you have some sort of natural aptitude for what you're pursuing. We can call it talent if you like, but I think as Stephen King said, talent is like table salt. It's abundant. So
Oh,
you need
I know I didn't know whether to love him or hate him when I read that. Oops, I don't know why this is jumping around. Go ahead. Yes, table salt.
Yeah, so you've got the table salt talent, you've got hard work, which, that's a loaded word, but
Yep.
that includes so many things over a long period of time. And then you've got a little bit of business savvy. And I feel like if you want to succeed like in the top percent, you're really looking at having all three of those things, like a three-legged stool. If you don't have one, the stool is pretty wobbly. So that's how I think business contributes to this, just being able to have a vision, to be able to direct your efforts to fulfill that vision. I think those are business qualities, business aptitude.
I think they are. And I think you're not a bummer about it. And I think that's really great. You take the time to allow the writer to understand that this is a business and how it might work for her, or him. But you also make it very specific, and it's tremendously helpful. And then there are those exercises, which neither you nor I are going to do, but that's fine. So the future of publishing, obviously, we've got some AI issues which are unbounding.
Mm,
I would not like to be the one to define where they begin and end.
yeah.
But what else, if anything, do you allow yourself to discuss when people talk about the future of publishing, other than, of course, the collapse of newspapers and
Mm.
the growth of not-for-profit journalism? What else do you talk about?
I'm always looking at how publishers start in ways that don't match our legacy idea of how publishers start. So, for example, a very, very recent example is how subscription box companies, these are the companies that will send you like a book or two a month or
Hmm.
every quarter in a very specific genre or category, they have started publishing arms, which is fascinating to me
Mm.
because it shows how much the industry is moving toward this company knows the audience, this company knows the readership, and now they're going to produce things the readership really wants to have. That's, I know it sounds strange, but that's not actually how the legacy publishers were really built. If you look at Penguin Random House, which is now, a conglomeration of lots and lots of little publishers that got subsumed, um, the name Random House actually relates to the fact what they publish is random.
Mhm.
It's for anyone and everyone. And I think authors are learning now, especially, that this isn't really helpful when it comes time to market and promote a book.
Mhm.
If they have to have a bespoke marketing plan for each and every book, because each and every book has a different audience, not all books are going to be supported equally. Authors may or may not have a partner in making the book visible, and the publisher often now depends on the author to make that book visible. So I think that's one like sea change, something that's been unfolding for many years now, where you see the companies, I'm not saying they're digital first. I don't think that's true of subscription box services, but they definitely reach their readers through digital media, whether that's newsletters, social media, etc. And then there is often this physical aspect to the business, like launching a book publishing arm.
Hmm. Good, nicely done. So, what have you got in specifically for the people on this call? We're memoir writers, and we get told all the time, memoir is the worst, most hard, but we've heard it all. You can't publish a book on suicide. You can't publish a book if
Mm,
a child has died. You can't. All these things, all these rules are meant to be broken, as far as I'm concerned, because I have clients that have published on suicide. I have clients that have published
mhm.
with the death of a child. These are, again, they're sayings, but they're not realities, absolutely. But there are some things in terms of the business of writing that are specific to memoir. Can you name a couple?
Well, I would say if I'm looking at market trends in particular,
Yep.
I think it really pays to be aware of how the memoirs that are getting signed by agents and publishers right now, and I'm talking about the bigger publishers, not the
Yep.
smaller ones. They tend to, if you're not like the guy who landed a plane in the Hudson, like if you're not like that, meaning you haven't had 15 minutes of fame, you haven't been on all the news networks, no one's heard of you. Usually there is a hybrid aspect to that book. And by hybrid, I mean there's some research going on. There's some issue that you're tackling that requires your investigation, meaning you're not just sitting at home in your armchair writing your life story. You are somehow engaging with the world and trying to figure out the answer to a question that
Hmm.
requires you to go out and read other people or go out and ask questions of other people or go out into the world in some manner.
Hmm.
I've seen some folks call this memoir plus. I've seen some people call it researched memoir, and then there's the term hybrid memoir. So I do feel like, at least in the commercial market, I would be looking for what's that other thread that you have in the memoir that's going to help draw a readership to it, that's going to help draw an editor or agent to it. And I have a really kind of weird metaphor uh, that also will help those who are working on whether when you're pitching your life story or pitching the hybrid memoir. This is a metaphor I've stolen from an agent, Anna Sproul Latimer. She does a really great Substack newsletter called How to Glow in the Dark. And she talks about when you pitch a book, you want the editor to come back to you with a dead bird.
Okay.
And what she means by that is, you know how if there are any cat owners out there, and I'm one of them, you know
Hmm.
how if your cat catches a bird, that this would apply to mice as well, but birds sound a little bit cuter. It will bring it to you as this offering. Look at what I brought you. Look. And what she means by an editor bringing you a dead bird is they bring you some story from their own lives that they must tell you and share with you right now because of what you said in your pitch. You have inspired them to kind of like turn off their professional brain, turn off whatever business, side of their brain is acting on that query or proposal, and they have to share something personal because of what you have written. That's the reaction you're kind of shooting for, especially I think with memoir.
I love that. And I get it. And for those people who are listening who are students of mine, we at the Memoir Project require you to know that memoir is not your life story, that you must have an argument, that you're showing the world something that you know based on what you've been through. And so I think when you provoke the reader to consider your transcendent change, you might very well get a dead bird in response. And that is going to be I don't have any tattoos, Jane, but I'm seriously thinking about a dead bird tattoo right now. Don't know that anybody would get it, but I'm thinking about it, or at least like needle pointing a dead bird onto a pillow. So
I
that's there. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add, if you write a newsletter, as I do, I've written one for many years. If you ever tell personal stories in that newsletter, and I would actually encourage all memoirists to do some of this, it's a good
Mhm.
way to test market your work. Um,
Absolutely.
if you are sending an effective newsletter, you will get dead birds in response. Um,
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
look for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why I encourage people to write op-eds, because you test that argument, that you get rid of all the feathers on that dead bird. You just
Mhm.
go right to the argument and you throw it out there and you say, is it possible that you think this too, basically to the readers, or have I taught you something you didn't know? And you can test your your market reliability, a market appeal. Yeah, that's great. All right, so let's see if I could get the slides to stop jumping. That would be nice, but apparently they don't want to. So you've got two newsletters. Before we take questions, I want to just make sure people understand that there's lots of ways to interact with you. Your website's terrific. You have Electric Speed, which has been published since 2009, reaching more than 25,000 subscribers. And the bottom line serves as an industry beacon for more than 2,500 publishing professionals. Also, you've collaborated with the Authors Guild. I love the Authors Guild. I've been a member since my first book, which was written when I was 26 years old. So whatever year that was, a million years ago. And they have always protected me and helped me.
Yeah.
So thank you for contributing the Author's Guild Guide to Self-Publishing. I think everybody should own a copy of that as well. So to reach Jane, you should go to businessofwriting.org. And I think you'll be amazed by what you find. So let's take some questions, because I know that the people on the call have a lot to ask you. So let's see. First, we have from Jim, traditional publishing. Oi, I love that. Oi, have gotten a handful of agent requests for manuscript, but no offer. When to decide to self or hybrid publish? Jim says that he sent out 150 agent queries with about 10 interested in seeing the work. Getting old, though. I
Yeah.
don't know if he means the work or him, but either way, somebody's getting old here.
So my general advice in these situations is if you've exhausted the list of potential agents for the work, like as far as you can tell, and I think that should take you, I mean, if you're querying pretty efficiently, that should take you somewhere between 6 and 9 months or less. It depends on the number you're querying. Then I would make sure that you take a look at any small, mid-sized publishers that don't require agents, just to be sure, just do your due diligence, make sure there isn't any publisher that might be a good fit. This is where you can look at any comparable titles or authors, see are there any independent publishers on there, and decide if you might try them before you move on to some other avenue where you would actually pay out of pocket. So I find that people often just skip that part. They don't
Mhm.
look for the small publisher, which I understand because A, it's actually a lot of work to figure out who these places are. And B, you're kind of going out without an agent to assist you. It can sometimes feel more intimidating. You don't know the legitimacy of some of these publishers. Anyone can call themselves a publisher. So I can kind of understand like steering around that, but I still think it's a worthwhile exercise, even if you just spend like a couple weeks looking into it.
I agree. I get books from some beautiful small publishers. And I used to think that only poetry had beautiful small publishers, but I'm seeing it in memoir more and more.
Yeah.
And it's not that hard to find. Google is an amazing thing, and it's a good place to go. Tanya wants to know if your book will become an Audible book at some point.
Oh, I hope so.
So do
The first the first edition did make it into audio, but I think it took at least a year, if not longer. And I did ask my publisher, "Hey, is that?" Because they license the rights to another company, so I'm still waiting to hear what their plan is. But I have to assume eventually it will come. You might just have to wait.
I think that's great. Marie wants to know is if it's true that a publisher will not want to publish your manuscript if you have posted the content on a blog or other public format already.
The only people who really care about that are literary journals. They tend to have a rule about things never having appeared elsewhere, especially in public, and some of them are very stringent. They even include like critique sites in that. But as far as book publishers and agents go, I they don't care if, but because reading a blog is not the same experience as reading a book. Now, I'm making some assumptions here, like that you haven't posted the entire book on your site, um, in a way that just looks very questionable. Like, why did you do that? Like, if it looks like you exercised poor judgment, that could be a black mark against you. But generally, if it's just what I would consider standard blogging activity, newsletter activity, so many books actually end up growing out of those spaces. Publishers wouldn't be able to publish anything, I think, if they restricted people to only things that never appeared online.
Absolutely. And I think I can tell you that three of the clients that I've worked with have published the Modern Love column in the New York Times, and all
Mhm.
three got book contracts
Yeah.
after. In other words, there's also the reverse of that, which is that write a good personal essay, write a good op-ed. One of our clients published a remarkable book on adult diagnosed autism after publishing a small essay in Cup of Joe. And the
Mm.
book came out last November with Macmillan. And it was a very big book. So, the other thing is that it can lead to some pretty great book deals.
Yes.
Yeah. So here we've got Gretel. Can you speak to royalty only publishing models, particularly mission driven that aligns well with my message? It seems like a no brainer strictly from a financial perspective, but possibly overall. Royalty only publishing models.
So I usually call these no advance deals,
Yep.
rather than royalty deals. So in these sorts of deals, the publisher isn't taking any financial risk by paying you in advance. What I would really scrutinize closely is some of the other details related that will be in the contract. For instance, what are the royalties? They should be higher than a advance contract out of
Yep.
respect, that they're not making that investment. You should get more on the royalties. And for those who don't know, average ebook royalty is 25%. I think you should probably be looking at as much as 50% if there's no advance. For the print, it's going to depend on the category and is it paperback, is it hardcover. But if there's no advance, I would say probably 15%, 20%, 25% and up, depending on what category you're in or what the format is. So look at those royalty percentages closely, and then figure out what, okay, if Are they doing a print run? Sometimes publishers will not pay in advance, and they will also not do a print run, which means they're relying on either print on demand or digital editions like ebook or audio. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but you need to know that up front.
Hmm.
Um, and understand its implications for where your book will be sold or what other support the publisher might be offering. Obviously, if a publisher invests in a print run, that is a financial risk. And hopefully they will be more compelled to support the book because they do have some money wrapped up in it.
Yep.
Again, not saying it's right or wrong whether they do this or not. It's just figure out their business model essentially, and then make your decision accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. Twain asks, has just finished a book. Congratulations, Twain. It's being copy edited. Is there a better alternative to um, is there better oh, I see. Better alternatives to IS and KDPP?
Oh, for self-publishing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, to me, those are the two big ones that are really hard to avoid if you want to have wide distribution as a self-published author. You might be able to sidestep some of that by using Draft to Digital. They're a distributor. They started out as an ebook distributor, but they've started doing print distribution as well. But guess what? They use Ingram for their print distribution. So all
Uh-huh.
roads lead back to Ingram uh, one way or another. So I generally tell people just set up your own account with Ingram and don't let someone else take a cut of the action.
Yeah, good. Good advice. Allie asks, platforms. What about existing public platforms? LinkedIn, Amazon author page, etc. Substack, Medium. Um, yeah, I think we kind of covered that, but do you have anything else to say on that?
Well, it gives me an opportunity to say when we talk about platform, people will list those sorts of sites, those online places. I think we all know what those places are. You don't have to be on all of them. I usually say focus on the one or two you do well and can sustain, or wherever you feel like you're getting the best engagement with readers. Please don't forget about the rest of your platform. So there's a great term that a colleague of mine created called lived platform, which I just love the term because it gets us away from the online piece and it gets us focused on how your life, the life that you have led, contributes to your platform. So the
Mm,
schools you've attended, the communities you live in, the organizations that you volunteer for, the places where you are already known, the publications that have put your work out, the editors that you have collaborated with, the other authors in your category or genre, etc. Please do not forget about the lived platform because that's often where you get the support to market and promote your book when it first comes out. And that's where opportunities tend to come from. So holistic approach is what I would say is.
nice. And that covers a lot of what Joanne is asking, Substack versus Medium, how to build an audience on either. I think of them as very different, but building an audience on both is on the writer. Do you have any quick thoughts on that?
I've never been a fan of Medium,
Mhm.
maybe because I know their long sordid history.
Yeah, I'm there. Yep.
Yeah. And I feel like I don't click on Medium links because I'm just going to hit a paywall, or that's my assumption, even if it's not true for a particular writer. I think Substack is definitely where you're going to find more action. I'm not saying Substack is, what, like some sort of superior, ethically run company. But if you want to see people who are building a platform, I almost always see it on Substack, not on Medium. So I do have an article at my site I would encourage you to look at. If anyone's considering newsletter or Substack platform building, it's titled Substack is both great and terrible for writers.
Hmm.
So it delivers my really conflicted feelings about the growth of that platform and everyone kind of jumping onto the newsletter bandwagon. I love newsletters. I mean, I think that's obvious since I send so many, but I think a lot of people are jumping on Substack in a way that's actually detrimental to their progress. So take a look at that article and decide how you want to handle it.
Yeah, I think we can't all be the $1 million hand over hand making money that, we can name the two or three people that have done that. And a lot of people are jumping on it for the purposes of making money, which
Yeah.
I always say, you got to love the work before you
Mhm.
start talking about
Mhm.
the money. You've just got to love the work. You cannot predict what will happen. Robin asks for you to say more about hybrids. They say they will work with writers to develop their cover, book blurb, format the book, copy edit, and then print and distribute. Do you think that is ever worthwhile?
So we need to talk about the term hybrid first, like a definition. And this is important because I think ultimately over the last 20 to 30 years, what we used to call a vanity publisher is now called a hybrid publisher. And in fact, the people who really want to criticize hybrids unfairly, I think, will call them vanity publishers to make them angry.
Yep.
So a hybrid publisher is really just a publisher you're going to pay to put your book out. The ones that really, I think, bring something important to the table are those that are essentially partnering with you in a way that gets the book into places you would not be able to get them on your own. That usually involves distribution, like we discussed earlier, meaning they can get books in stores. It usually involves you investing in a print run, and it usually involves you investing in a marketer or a publicist to support the sales of that print run. All of these costs are going to fall on you. The hybrid, for its part, is going to take a percentage of your profits. Like what you're signing with one of these hybrids that do these things I mentioned, you're signing what looks very much like a traditional publishing contract, and it is a long-term relationship. There's also a type of, I'll call them a service provider to try and differentiate. A service provider who will help you with all of the technical aspects of getting a book published, like the production side of it, which involves cover design and layout and all the things that go into putting a book on the market, and then the book comes out and you part ways. You're still paying, but it's more like what I would call a service agreement rather than a traditional publishing agreement.
Hmm.
So the reason I separate these two is because the hybrid service I described tends to be far more expensive. You're looking at $20,000 plus. Are you going to make that money back? Probably not, unless you're selling a boatload of books. If you're hiring a company to assist you and help you manage all of that production, you have a much better chance of earning the investment back. And then once you start hiring one of those companies, any company, you always have to think about, am I just writing a check to make the headache go away?
Yeah.
Meaning I don't want to figure out the editor or the designer, or I don't want to make a decisions. I don't want to set up the accounts. I don't want to. And believe me, like I understand it. There are a lot of headaches involved, but I want to be absolutely clear. These companies don't necessarily sell your book. They can put out a book that has better potential to sell because they're making it look better. Maybe they're providing editing and design that gives it a better chance, gives it a better position. And so that will help your sales. But are they actually selling your book? For the vast majority of authors, they are not.
Hmm. Yeah. We've got a couple of we've only got about 6 minutes left. I promised Jane we'd get her out of here at 1 o'clock Eastern. So Mary Jane asks if she should include her married name and her single name on her byline. I would say yes, I did when I got married. I just added Smith to mine so that anybody reading my prior books would know to do so. And I'm just going to handle that one. And
Mm.
Kathy asks, what is not-for-profit journalism? Go look at New York Focus, Kathy. New York Focus. You'll be amazed by what they do, what they cover. They tend to be hyper local, and they tend to, well, not all, no, ProPublica, places that are established and are looking to not, they're not the big traditional piece, the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune. They've got owners, they've got investors, and while you can say they're going to be really susceptible to influence, for the most part, I would say they're not. They're being created as an alternative model. But Kathy has a question for you. How important is seeking legal review for a memoir before self-publishing or traditional publishing? Jane, would you say legal review?
I don't know many authors who have the money to spend on that. That's
Me
the
neither.
honest answer.
Yep, that's a
Um,
good one.
so I think, however, there are ways to self-assess the
Yep.
manuscript and the risk it presents. There's a really wonderful book by an agent and lawyer. Her name's Jackie Lipton. She and I had a conversation at the Virginia Festival of the Book that's recorded and available on YouTube. It's called Law and Authors. You can find it on my YouTube channel.
Hmm.
Watch that video. We go over some of the issues that are really relevant to memoirists and others, and or get her book. It's called Law and Authors. It's very
Great.
readable. It's a lot of fun to read because she goes into some really fascinating cases that have set standards for what could get you in trouble or not.
Hmm.
Um, so, and I also have some articles at my site that go into what to be aware of when publishing a memoir as far as the legal aspects. Just go to my site and type in the search bar memoir and legal, and you'll come up with quite a few things. I think it's possible to self-assess on your own. It is pretty rare for memoirists to get sued. I'm not saying you won't be sued, but it's pretty rare. Um, so what I would say is the most important defense you have and the most important policy, of course, is telling the truth. Um,
Absolutely. Couldn't agree
and
more.
don't say anything you can't back up, and put it all, of course, in your lens. And don't cast aspersions. Don't reveal embarrassing information that's not pertinent to the story. So all of that information I just shared in like 5 seconds there, you can find in that book and in those articles.
Yeah, I'm going to try to choose a couple so we can bounce through these. I'm sorry, no, we're not going to get to all the questions today, but I think we've answered a lot of this. We've got Jamie who wants to know if they should book a consultation with an agent. Jamie, that's not the way I understand. I mean, I've got an agent. I've never booked a consultation with an agent in my life, but it's got a book here. Jane, how would you phrase the experience with agents? I don't think of them as people that we book consultations with.
I don't either. Now there are opportunities to talk with agents often at conferences,
Yes,
like pitch
right.
appointments and so on. And I think some of that has moved online. It might be that Manuscript Wishlist regularly offers consultations with agents. But just be cautious about what you spend your money on. Understand that agents are not all alike. They all run very different businesses from one another. Yes, they're all in the publishing industry, but I find that this is where you get into some of the most conflicting opinions. Also with editors and publishers, if you really depends on the agent you're consulting with, you could have the next one tell you the opposite. So be really clear on what you want to get out of that conversation. Is this someone who you think has something important to share with you because of who they represent or the genre they're known for? Make sure it's a good investment.
Yeah. Speaking of agents, Sandy asks us if there's a preferred list of agents. I always use the Poets and Writers Agent Database. What do you use, Jane, to go and look at who's accepting what and when?
I prefer publishersmarketplace.com. Now that
Yep.
will cost you some money, but it
Hmm.
allows you to search their deals database and you can see all of the deals associated with agents and publishers. And it really quickly it gives you an idea of who's selling what right now. The database I tend to prefer is Duotrope. That's duotrope.com. It also costs a fee, but it's pretty reasonable. So that those are the two places I go.
Well, in an effort to get you out of here on time, I want to say thank you so much to you for spending time with us today. I know everybody benefited from it. Thank you to all the people that are here. I'm sorry that we didn't get to all the questions, but one of the questions was how to reach Jane, and that's what's on the screen right now, businessofwriting.org. Jane, I think you're a wonder, and I think you're a gift to all writers. So thank you from all of us for everything you do, and keep doing it. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Great to be here.
Great to be here. Thank you, everybody, for coming along. Come and see me at the Memoir Project. Stay in touch, write well. And everybody, if you would, just send up a quick thanks to Jane in the chat. That would be great. We're getting them. They're rolling in. You're getting huge. Look at this. Everybody loved it. All right, Jane, let you go. Thanks a million. Take care,
Thank
everybody.
you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.